The morning after we buried Claire, I sat in our kitchen for 3 hours without moving, not crying, not sleeping. Just sitting in that chair she always complained about, the one with the wobbly left leg. I kept promising to fix, staring at her coffee mug still on the counter. It had a ring of dried chamomile tea at the bottom. She'd made it the night before she died. 2 days ago, or 3, I couldn't tell anymore. Our daughter Maisie was upstairs asleep. She was 7. She'd cried herself hollow the night before, and I'd sat on the edge of her bed, rubbing circles on her back until she finally went still. Then I came downstairs and just stopped. That's the thing nobody tells you about grief. It isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just a man in a kitchen, staring at a mug, unable to understand how a Tuesday can happen without a specific person in it. Claire and I had been together for 11 years. Married for 8. We met at a graduate photography program in Portland. She was shooting documentary portraits. I was studying architectural design. She was the kind of woman who noticed things. Not just visually, the way photographers do, but emotionally. She'd walk into a room and within 10 minutes know which 2 people had an unresolved argument, and which one was pretending to be fine. She was never wrong about people. Which is maybe why what I found later stung so deeply. Because it meant she'd seen something in herself she never let me see. The accident happened on Route 9 outside Ashford, Vermont. A logging truck ran a red light on a wet road. The police said she likely didn't have time to react. I replayed that sentence in my head so many times it stopped sounding like English. What I couldn't stop thinking about, though, even at the funeral, even while the pastor spoke and Maisie clutched my hand so tightly her nails left half-moon marks in my palm, was where Claire had been going. She was heading toward Strickland County. Toward a rural stretch of road that led, among other things, to a farmhouse property she'd bought 6 years ago and never once mentioned to me. I found out about the property 8 months before she died. Not because she told me, because I was doing our taxes. We handled finances separately. It was one of those early relationship habits that hardened into permanence. I did the federal filing, she handled Vermont state taxes since we'd moved there. That year, she was overwhelmed with a major commission, a 6-month documentary project photographing opioid recovery communities across New England, so she asked me to handle everything. I found the property deed copy in a folder in her filing cabinet. 12 acres, a farmhouse and 2 outbuildings. The deed was in her name alone. Purchased for $47,000 6 years prior, a cash purchase, no mortgage. I stood in our home office for a long time. Then I put the folder back, filed the taxes, and waited. I waited because I didn't know what I was waiting for. I kept telling myself there was an explanation. That she'd bought it as a creative retreat and was going to surprise me. That it was an investment. That she was planning something. I told myself the story that hurt least, and I kept telling it until I almost believed it. I never asked her directly. I know how that sounds. But if you've been in a long marriage, you understand that some silences grow their own root systems. By the time I found that deed, we'd been through 2 miscarriages, a cross-country move, her mother's death, and a year where we barely touched each other. There were already rooms in our marriage with the lights off. I wasn't sure I had the energy to open another door. So I didn't, and then she was gone. And the door was all that was left. The farmhouse was 22 miles from our home, in Millhaven. I drove there 4 days after the funeral, on a gray October morning that felt like the sky itself was exhausted. I'd gotten the address from the property records online. I brought nothing except my keys and a thermos of bad coffee. The road into Strickland County narrows as it climbs, 1 lane most of the way, flanked by birch and maple that were past their peak color by then, leaves mostly down, the branches bare and reaching like hands. I passed a small dairy operation, a shuttered farm stand, a rusted mailbox with the numbers spray-painted in orange. The farmhouse sat at the end of a gravel lane, partially obscured by a row of overgrown spruce. It was older than I expected, mid-1800s construction. I estimated, with the low-pitched roof and central chimney of that era. But it wasn't abandoned. That was the first thing I noticed. The shutters were painted. Recently, the paint wasn't weathered. A stack of split firewood sat under a covered lean-to beside the house, the cuts still light and fresh. There were tire tracks in the gravel, overlapping and repeated, not from one visit but many. I sat in my car for several minutes. Then I got out. The front door was locked. I tried the key on Claire's ring, the one I hadn't recognized, the one with no label, and it opened on the second try. The smell hit me first. Cedar and turpentine and something underneath. old paper and candle wax, and the specific staleness of a space that's occupied but not lived in. I stood in the entrance and let my eyes adjust. It was a single large room on the ground floor. Exposed beams. A wood stove in the corner. And covering every available inch of wall space. Pinned and framed and stacked in flat files and leaning in careful rows against the baseboard. Photographs. Not her usual work. Not the unflinching documentary portraits that had gotten her gallery shows and a regional award and a profile in a Boston arts magazine. These were different. Personal, intimate in a way that had nothing to do with voyeurism. They were all of the same place. Or rather the same piece of land. Shot across seasons, snow-heavy winter mornings, the mud of April thaw, midsummer green, the fire of late September. The same small pond, the same stone wall with the gap in it. The same hill, the same sky from the same window. There were maybe 400 photographs, maybe more. I walked slowly. I didn't touch anything. On the second floor, a low slant-ceilinged space with a single dormer window, there was a desk. A good one. An old teacher's desk with a scarred top, and on it a logbook. Hardbound. Her handwriting. I sat down and opened it. The entry started 6 years ago. The first one was short, found it. Exactly as Grandma Vera described. The pond is still there. The stone wall. Even the ash tree she used to climb is still standing, though it's enormous now. I don't know how to explain what I felt standing in that field. Like something unclenched. I read for 2 hours. Claire's maternal grandmother, Vera Sutton, had grown up on that land. Her family had farmed 12 acres in Strickland County from the early 1900s until the 1960s, when her parents sold it and moved to New Hampshire. Vera had talked about it her whole life. The pond in October, the gap in the stone wall where the deer came through, the way the light hit the hill in late afternoon. When Vera developed dementia in her final years, she returned to that land constantly in her mind. It was where she was happiest, even when she couldn't remember the decade or her daughter's face. Claire had visited Vera in the memory care facility every single week until Vera died. She'd held her hand and listened to those stories dozens of times. After Vera passed, Claire spent 8 months tracking down the property, found it had passed through 3 owners. Negotiated a private sale. Used money from an inheritance she'd received from a great-uncle, money she'd never mentioned because, as she wrote in the logbook, I didn't want it to become a discussion about finances or investment or whether it made sense. I needed it to just be mine and Vera's. She'd been coming here once or twice a month for 6 years. Photographing the land through every season. Building an archive. Tending the space. Splitting the wood. Keeping the shutters painted. Leaving it as Vera would have wanted it. The logbook wasn't a secret journal of sins. It was a grief project. A private, sustained, 6-year act of love for a dead woman who had once found peace in a field. I turned to the last entry, dated 3 weeks before the accident. I've been thinking about showing this to Daniel. I know I should have years ago. I think I was afraid he'd make it practical. Afraid he'd love it, but in a different way than I do. The way he loves old buildings for their bones and their craft. And I love it for something I can't name. Something that feels like breathing. I don't want it explained. I want it felt. But lately I think he would feel it. I think I've been protecting this from him out of habit, and I'm not sure that habit is serving either of us. Maisie should know this place. She has Vera's eyes. She notices things the same way. I think I'm going to bring them here. After the holidays, maybe. When the light is right. I closed the logbook. The room was very quiet. Outside the dormer window, a crow landed in the ash tree and sat there. Just sat. I want to tell you that I cried then, and I did, but not the way you might expect. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, the way grief gets when it stops being shock and becomes something you have to figure out how to carry. I sat at that desk and let it move through me. I wasn't angry with her. I had expected to be. I'd spent 8 months holding a low-burning suspicion that there was something wrong at the center of my marriage. Some hidden fault line. And finding that the secret was love, was tenderness, was a woman quietly tending a piece of her grandmother's memory. I couldn't be angry. I could only be sad and grateful and sorry that I'd waited so long in silence that she'd waited too. We were both good at protecting things. We both should have been braver. I went back every weekend that November. I didn't tell anyone at first. I just drove up, unlocked the door, and sat with her photographs. I studied each one. I started to understand what she'd been seeing, not just the landscape, but the light, the seasons turning, The way the stone wall cast a different shadow depending on the month. She'd been building something that would have taken years more to complete. I decided I was going to finish it. I'm not a photographer. I'm an architect. But I know how to see a space and I know how to listen to what a space needs. I bought a camera, an older film camera, the same model she'd preferred. I read. I practiced. I spent 4 months taking photographs so bad they humbled me. But I kept going. By spring, I started bringing Maisie. The first time she walked through that door and looked at the walls, she didn't say anything for almost a full minute. Then she turned to me and said, "Mom took all of these?" "Yeah," I said. "Every single one." She walked the room slowly the way Claire used to walk rooms, reading them, feeling them. When she got to the window that looked toward the pond, she stopped. "Can we go outside?" she asked. We walked the land that afternoon, found the gap in the stone wall. Watched a heron fish the far edge of the pond. The ash tree was bare still, but you could see the buds forming at the tips of each branch, just barely, if you looked. Maisie found a flat rock near the water and sat on it like she'd sat there before, like she recognized it. "Dad," she said, "I think Grandma Vera was right. This place feels like breathing." I don't know if she'd read those words somewhere. I don't know if it was coincidence. But I stood there and felt something shift in my chest. Not heal, exactly. Not close. Just shift. Some losses don't resolve, they integrate. They become part of the architecture of who you are. The same way an old stone wall becomes part of a landscape. You stop seeing it as a wound in the ground and start seeing it as something that belongs there. The photographs are hanging in an exhibition at a gallery in Burlington next spring. All 412 of them, arranged by season. The way Claire had mapped them in a notebook I found in the flat file drawer. I added 63 more. Mine aren't as good, but they're part of the story now. The title of the show is hers. She'd written it on the inside cover of the logbook in her careful handwriting, the same way she titled all her projects. What Vera knew, I think she knew it would be seen eventually. I think she was building it for all of us, even when she thought she was only building it for herself. Some people leave things behind on purpose. Some people leave things behind because they ran out of time. Either way, what they leave is still a kind of language. And if you're patient enough, if you're willing to drive 22 miles on a gray morning and open a door you were afraid of, you can learn to read it.